Thanks so much for making our tails wag by watching this guest interview from Arden Moore's Four-Legged Life. Four-Legged Life. Make sure to subscribe so you're up to date with all of our Four-Legged Life content. Four-Legged Life. Four-Legged Life.
Pause up, pet pals. Welcome to Arden Moore's Four-Legged Life Show. I'm your host, Arden Moore. Now, this is a first for our show. We're going to spotlight rats. Not just your everyday rat. We're talking about rats that drive cars. What? And do much more. I bet you are now as curious as maybe a cat to find out. Here to explain some very surprising qualities about rats is our special guest, Dr. Kelly Lambert, who is the professor of behavioral neuroscience at the University of Richmond. She spends her days investigating rodents, raccoons, and non-human primates. My, what a great gig you got. Welcome to the show, Dr. Lambert.
Great to be here, Arden.
Hey, everybody. I first discovered Dr. Lambert and her work. I was watching a Netflix special. It was called The Hidden Lives of Pets. Check it out. On my screen popped up rats behind steering wheels. And Dr. Lambert, my big ginger cat, Casey, all went head up and went, what? So you even got my cat to watch your show.
Well, they want their little cars too. So.
They do. And we have a lot to cover because you're brilliant. You're a brainiac.
I'm not as smart as the rats. I can only aspire to be as smart and adaptive as they are. So,
yeah, that's the key word. And I think as we plunge into all this today, people need to know they've been on this planet a long, long time, and it's because of the A letter, adaptability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain a little bit? Give us a little inside peek at the adaptability factor.
Right. So rats in this country, they kind of joined the folks who came over on the boats. They seem to like, they're commensal species, which means that they eat what we eat from the table. So they like to follow humans. And so we talk about opportunistic species who are, the key is being flexible. So they can eat different types of food, whatever's in the dumpsters, whatever we eat, they're eating. They're very adaptable as far as climate goes.
Really?
And because they live, all over, especially the Rattus, the Norway rat, which isn't really from Norway, but Rattus norvegicus. They're all over the place. So they're very adaptable, very flexible. So being able to, we live in a changing world. So being able to, to learn to eat a new food or adapt to a new terrain, like humans have explored and conquered, taken over almost all of the planet, most of it. So we were able to go into different climates and learn new behaviors and new resources and such. So rats and those raccoons are opportunistic. There are several, really opportunistic animals. And to make a contrast with my students, I compare to some animals that aren't flexible and are endangered, like the koala. It's such a cute animal. But when I was at a conference, they have that going for them. When I was at a conference right before the pandemic in Australia, I was really fascinated by the koalas. But just to learn that they're trying to, as humans do, we demolish, damage environments that animals love and need. And so they have tried to relocate the koalas to new, safe environments that have, the food, the eucalyptus and such. And they just can't stay there. They climb down the trees and they just start walking as if they're walking home. And they get hit by cars and killed by other animals. And they also
have a very limited diet. I mean, you were talking about how rats can pick anything out of the trash, but the koala has such a
just this eucalyptus, which is really poison. So brains take a lot of energy. Our brains are about 2% of our body, but they require 20% of the fuel that we consume. So we need to be able to be smart about eating and metabolic, all this, to be able to maintain these really, brains with all the bells and whistles. Well, the koala, because it eats this eucalyptus, which is pretty much poison, and it's smart in the sense that nobody else wants it. So they've got
Yeah.
this. But a lot of their energy goes into digesting this. So it doesn't leave a lot for their brains. I grew up in Alabama.
So there's no koala Mensa group that you know of?
No, I grew up in Alabama. So after looking at their actual brains, which hasn't been a lot done, they look deflated. They don't even take up the whole cranial cavity. So in Alabama, we would say, bless their hearts. But without that ability to adapt with eating new food and varied food substances and learning to live in a new habitat and maybe acquire new behaviors that are necessary, as the world changes, it leaves you behind. So rats are not in that category.
No, I was wondering. I
tiny
wanted
little
to ask
brains,
you,
but can adapt.
rats are very adaptable, but there seems to be a bigger survivor. And I wanted to know, I mean, cockroaches. Cockroaches have been around before rats, I believe, and ticks. They seem to outsmart us humans. And I mean, I would say they're pretty adaptable. Would you agree?
Yeah, they are adaptable as well. I kind of focus more on the mammalian brains. But yes,
What does that mean, medallion brains? Tell us in English.
Pardon?
What does medallion brains mean?
Oh, I would say I'm misspeaking. Mammalian brains. So
Mammalian.
The mammals.
Okay,
so
the mammals.
Mammals that so what they share, and this kind of gives a shout out to maternal behavior and the importance of that. So when animals evolved so that they are the mammary glands and that they're giving birth to animals that they're continuing to nurture versus dropping eggs like the turtles and such.
Okay, I like your gig better.
Drive through parenting. So this their name from the mammal name really comes from this maternal nurturing that is required for these fancy brains. So mammals, we're mammals, primates, the rats are mammals, and everything, a lot of animals in between. If they're giving birth to these live animals that they're going to nurse and have lactation, and that parental experience is important for the mammal brain to develop.
Well, I've just been schooled in a good way from Dr. Kelly Lambert, and I want to shout out because I want you all to dive in and learn all the cool things that she and her staff and team are doing. And the website is kellylambertlab.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in this case, it's a lab as in laboratory and not Labrador.
Yeah.
But before we take a quick break, we got you do have a nice purring mammal in your house too. What is your mammal called?
I have two mammals.
Okay.
Three if I include my husband.
Oh, why not?
So Nico is my 20-pound Russian blue Maine Coon cat.
Wow.
And he's named after Nico Tinbergen, who won the Nobel Prize for studying behavior in animals. And Nico is a delight. We got him right at the beginning of the pandemic, not knowing that the pandemic was really happening. And he is very affectionate and very smart, and we adore him. And then we have a little Havanese puppy dog who is not as big as our cat. So our cat is bigger than our dog. So they have a good time playing. And
what's your dog's name?
Brody. Just
Brody?
because the family liked the name Brody. They kind of don't like mom naming the animals because I usually have my past dog was named Golgi after an Italian neuroscientist that had a mustache, kind of like my Maltese. He was a Maltese. So they're like, Mom, can't we just use a normal name? So they let me do Nico. It kind of sounded kind of cool, but
I have a feeling that our guest, Dr. Kelly Lambert, also probably dug the Big Bang Theory show, but we're going to find out more about her after we take this break. So sit and stay. We'll be right back. welcome back to the Four-Legged Life Show. I'm your host, Arden Moore. I love our special guest. She keeps surprising me with mammal curveballs. She is shares her home in Virginia with her hubby and a cool cat and a very sweet dog. And she spends her days learning as much as she can about rats, raccoons, and other mammals. Rats. I mean, if you could be the PR agency for rats, what would be a few things you could share with us that make us give them a little more cred, a little more respect?
Oh, there's so much. They always outsmart me. But just to introduce you to the world of rats, they're great moms. I mentioned that maternal behavior is so important for the development of mammalian brains. So they give birth, between maybe 8 and 14. We call them pups, the little rat babies. They're also been referred to as pinkies. They because they look like little pink sausages or something. They don't have any hair. Yeah, about the size of the pinky too. The pink skin. So they're totally, undeveloped at that. Well, not totally, but they certainly need maternal care. And the rat moms, it's interesting to look at families structure in different mammals. So the rats are definitely a single mom model. So the dad is kind of a sperm donor and then goes on, is not important. Later. Yeah. See you later, alligator. And so this mom is in the wild. We take better care in the lab, but in the wild is responsible for, she has these, 10 or so very vulnerable pups. So she has to stay on that nest, lactate, feed another 12 individuals plus herself, plus get off the nest. And so we've done some work showing that when they give birth, they, I don't know if they're more intelligent, but they show more efficient problem solving and search strategies to get food.
Really?
Yeah. Because they need to get out there, get that food, get back to the nest and regulate their emotions so they're not expending all their energy and stressing out. So they give birth and raise these animals. They're reproductive machines. I mean, some people don't like.
Well, I was going to ask you, I know cats, the gestation period is about 60 some days. What is it for rats, and how often can a single mom rat get knocked up?
Yeah. So their gestational period is 21 days. And so in the wild, it's been reported that they can get pregnant the day after they deliver.
Oh, no.
So that when they
wean those boys.
So that when they wean their pups 21 days later and they leave the nest, they are able to deliver another, 10 or 14 more pups. So, and then they're reproductively mature at about 70 days of age. So you can see exponentially how they can reproduce and take over the world, so to speak. This is why.
I mean, I'm fascinated by this. So, I mean, Mother's Day is every day for a rat, right?
Yeah. They probably, are either they're pregnant or, are lactating or somewhere in between. Family planning, well, they maximize their families. But they also have, so that's parental behavior, but they're have a wonderful sense of smell. So when you look at their brain, it's like the first third of their brain is devoted to smell. So they can smell things that we can't smell. So we're
Can
not.
you give an example? I mean, I tell people in my pet first aid classes that I teach, you can drop a Cheeto in a swimming pool and your dog, your cat will smell it. How does the rat stack up?
Well, that's a great point, because dogs are very olfactory dependent as well. So I don't have a direct comparison about like a number of receptors or such, but one wonderful story to kind of explain the potential of their olfactory ability is there's a group of rats in Africa called the African pouch rat. And if you look up hero rats, you may have seen this in the news.
Yeah.
So an individual trained, they're very large rats, and they live to be a little bit longer. Rats in my lab, well, rats that we have around here live to be about 2 to 3 years old, but in the wild, it's up in the wild. In the wild, they probably don't live, past 6 months or a year. But in Africa, these African pouch rats have been trained to smell TNT and landmines, so that in Mozambique, where there were so many landmines that were made, just hurting and injuring little kids who wanted to go out and play in the fields. It was the rats that were trained to smell it, and that they would kind of suit up, and then when they smelled it, they would gently start to dig, and then the suited humans, would come in and remove that landmine. So they saved humans' lives by being able to smell that under the ground.
But the training that's involved, I mean, there's a lot of principles and training, counter conditioning, all that. Yeah. I'm assuming for all the people out there that are maybe dog or cat trainers or behaviorists, there's some similar approaches to training, right?
Classical conditioning, operant conditioning. They were using clicker training that I'm sure you use, familiar with. So they would take up to a year or 2 years training. So they were kind of like James Bond rats. And it's interesting. You may say, why wouldn't they use the dogs to sniff this? Which they could, but they couldn't because the dogs would be too heavy and they would trip the landmine. So
even the chihuahuas would get in trouble.
Yeah,
they'd be at risk.
Yeah. So the rats were light enough, even though they were larger rats, so that the rats would be safe and the humans. So there are all kinds of potential without even smelling or tuberculosis and certain chemicals that would be associated with illness. They could do it faster than humans in a lab doing their assays. So keen sense of smell, similar to dogs, but in a smaller package. They can swim for long periods of time. They don't love it. I say they don't love it. I'm not sure exactly what rats love, but their stress hormones spike a little bit. So it's a workout for them, but they can, under sewage and they've been known to swim to an island, for love or whatever. So they can swim into like toilets. They can go up the plumbing. There's videos of that.
Nice. Now I'm really going to check when I have to go do.
No, I'm sorry. I just killed that experience. I just ruined that experience.
No, I like that because safety first. Safety first.
Yeah. So if you see a little nose poking up, that's a pretty bold move. They're going where, they haven't been before. And they can find little crooks in the plumbing and kind of take a breath and then keep swimming. They can swim for hours if necessary. So they're very.
Move over, Michael Phelps. You're nothing compared to a rat. Oh my God.
Oh, and Eva, this is the most, maybe one of the most.
Okay, we got about 30 seconds before our next break. So go ahead.
If there's a tiny little hole, they can collapse. If their head can fit in it, their body can, because they can collapse their rib cage to become thinner. They can fit through those holes. So they really
cats have a flexible spine, but they're even more contorted, right?
So James Bond rats, here we go.
I see a T-shirt coming, James Bond rats. I bet all of you tuning in right now are like, I'm digging this. I am being fascinated and schooled on rats by probably one of the premier experts in the world, and she is Dr. Kelly Lambert. She's at the University of Richmond. We're going to dive in a little bit more after we take this break. So swim, 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 you little rats. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Four-Legged Life Show. I'm your host, Arden Moore. I'm having one of the coolest guests I've ever had, and she is Dr. Kelly Lambert. She is at the University of Richmond. Her fancy title is the professor of behavioral neuroscience. You got to check out her site, kellylambertlab.com, because there's some really cool stuff on that site. I want to backtrack in time. You said you grew up in Alabama. Did you always have a kindred spirit with rats or all mammals, or what was Kelly as a kid?
Yeah, Kelly as a kid was pretty much all animals. So I was the kid going into the woods to see if I could get little bird eggs and incubate them under my pillow. That didn't go very well. I grew up along the Gulf of Mexico. I'd bring crabs from the beach to see if they could adapt to my grassy yard. That didn't go well either. Now I look at how animals adapt to environments. So at 4 years of age, I was starting these experiments about how some adapt and some don't. Are you from a family of professors, or what were your parents? First generation college student.
Really?
Absolutely. So my education was in the woods and with animals. Loved cats and dogs probably more of a cat person growing up, but I love them both now.
Mhm.
I remember catching a little mouse at my grandmother's and just thinking it was so cute. And then I put it in of course, a big mason jar, and I tried to
Peace.
feed it my grandmother's yummy homemade biscuits. And I was so surprised that it didn't eat those. But now I know that they're very bait shy. It's hard to trap rodents because they're very smart about if this food is new, something's up. Whereas something
Are you
looks yummy to
kidding?
me, I gobble it up. I don't say, why is this in this position here? And this is new. So some research suggests that they'll go buy a new food source for weeks before they feel safe about eating it. But anyway, when I was a kid in Alabama, I just
I love
adored
this.
animals. And I remember when I was young, my mother would have the Johnny Carson show, and Joan Embry. I don't know if you remember her, but she was, kind of one of these zoo animal correspondents. And if I knew she was going to be on, I would sneak out the hallway and watch, and she'd bring, these animals. And I just thought that was so fascinating. So I've always been a student of animals.
I love it. So we have teased our faithful pet pals at the beginning to talk about rats who drive cars. I mean, I'm kind of saying move over Tesla self-driving. Our special guest has trained them to drive and steer and all that. And that's what was part of the episode segment on the hidden lives of pets on Netflix. So talk a little bit about what made you come up with this idea and be our eyes, if you will. What were you able to accomplish with your very talented lab rat team?
Right. So I came here to the University of Richmond about 6 years ago after a long career at Randolph-Macon College. And one of my colleagues here in the psychology department, she had seen some video of goldfish in a museum kind of exhibit. And if they would swim in a certain area of their aquarium or tank, it would move that aquarium in that direction. And they seemed to kind of be getting that. And this colleague, Beth Crawford, she's a cognitive scientist, so she's interested in all of that. And she said, Kelly, do you think you could teach a rat to drive a car? Because I'm the only person in the department who works with rats. And I'm this natural behavior, all this. And I thought, well, why in the world would anyone want to do that? And I kind of laughed that off. And then I thought, I'm new. Maybe I need to be a team player. Maybe I shouldn't laugh off the ideas of my colleagues. Yeah. And then I've said, like I said in that interview, once you start thinking about designing a car or a vehicle, we call them rodent operated vehicles or ROVs.
Wait a minute. We got to say that again. ROV equals what?
Rodent operated vehicles.
Of course it does.
Once you start thinking about what that design would look like and how the animals would interact with it, you can't stop. So I said, okay, Beth, let's just have coffee and start thinking about this. So we started off with a cereal container, plastic container, and she did some wiring, some programming. It was such a wonderful experience. I have undergraduate students here. So together we kind of learned, what is a rat's natural behavior? What would it engage to drive the car? What would it feel comfortable in? Our rats love Fruit Loops. So
stick shift, automatic,
we played around with that. It was too wobbly. We've done not human factors, but rat factors engineering. Where do they want to press down or away from them or to them, or the wobbly kind of gear shift? So we did all of that. And made a lot of mistakes, but it was a wonderful learning experience. I thought because they're very olfactory dependent that they would use their nose to orient and to engage like the activating, but they wouldn't do. I mean, in retrospect, their nose is very sensitive, so they don't want to just put it on a wire, I guess. We accidentally, we had bars that I was hoping they would engage with their nose area, and one day we had a Fruit Loop or something out, and they grabbed the bar to try to reach out. And when they grabbed the bar, it would engage. And I thought, okay, I think we can teach them to grab. So they taught us, and we were teaching them. It's really wonderful when you're learning from each other and another species like a rat, and you have to be humble enough to know that they can school you in several things. So then we knew that rats, they naturally kind of rear up on their hind legs, and they could grab this. And so it took a lot of patience, and we used something called shaping, where we reinforce small little increments. First, let's get into this car and you get your reward. And then you walk toward the steering area and you get your reward.
Slow and steady. I mean, you see these things at, where cats, dogs, and other things perform on stage at these, not Disney, but those places. And I know there's a concept also called back chaining, where you go from the back and reverse, and then they want to go to do that. I don't know if you use back chaining at all.
We've done a lot of variations, especially once we taught them to forward drive. Then we would position the car where they couldn't forward drive forward to get it, and they would require turning. So they do the goal, and then they kind of have to backtrack there. And interestingly, I mean, it takes a long time to train them to the concept of steering. But once they learn the left steer, like turning left, they automatically knew the right, because they learned this concept of steering in that direction. So when you would start them anywhere in this big driving arena, it wasn't just that they were memorizing, do this, do this, do this. They had to orient themselves, and they are not highly visual. They have great smell, but they can see, but they're nocturnal.
So it's like
animals.
Mr. Magoo behind the wheel, right?
Yeah, they're nocturnal animals, so they don't have clear. They certainly don't have color vision to the extent that we have, and they don't have clear vision. But they could see. We had the Fruit Loop tree. That was like the drive-in they were going toward, and so they would have to turn themselves around and navigate to that.
That's respect. I'm giving rats some respect. Yeah. I mean, this kind of puts you on the map. I know you've published studies, you've written books, you actually got to give a TEDx talk in Bermuda. That's not bad. But this rat thing, tell me, it says, according to my notes, you've been featured in more than 1,500 news outlets and on TV, and it's finally time you got onto the Four-Legged Life show, right?
Right. At least my rats have been featured. My name is usually thrown in there, but it's more about the rats. That's an interesting question, because you didn't mention that. I'd like to think a serious neuroscientist.
Yes. No, you are.
Looking at how environments.
You were the Virginia Professor of the Year in 2008.
For some reason, but very interested in how behavior or environments sculpt our brains, and how we navigate emotional stress and chronic stress, and models for psychiatric illness. So very passionate about that. So,
well, we're going to find out. We got to take a quick break, but we're going to find out more about her research. And I do want you all to go, please go to kellylambertlab.com. I keep saying that because you're going to see a lot of cool things, including a rat. Is it called Rat City Video, or what's it called?
Yeah, that's the Canadian Broadcasting Company just did that, Rat City.
All right. So everybody sit, just show some respect to rats, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Four-Legged Life Show. I'm your host, Arden Moore, and we are diving into the world of rats with probably one of the most honored professors of research in neuroscience on this topic. I'm just pumping you up, girl, Dr. Kelly Lambert. And it's a cool topic because you've talked about at the very beginning how adaptable rats are. And I'm just saying they surprise us, but you talked about the brain being 2% on average. We expend about 20% of our energy in our
or the brain,
skull. How's that compare with rats? Are they pretty good about that?
Yeah, I mean their brains are proportionately, the same, similar, and they do not have all the bells and whistles that we have. So it's even more, when I say bells and whistles, the density of their neurons is not similar to the density of our neurons. Obviously, their brains are very small. The outside area of our brains has all these wiggles, because our cortex is smushed in to give us more
I love the way you scientifically describe this.
Yeah, I'm
Squished
trying
in.
to
Keep going.
squished in
Wiggle.
technical term.
You're my kind of
If
scientist.
you want to take no gyrification is what we would say. But the rat's brain, now it's just as smooth as a baby's bottom. So they don't have a lot of brain real estate, but it amazes me how much they can do with what they have. So they are expending things very wisely. And I was mentioning before that, with all my more serious science, that this is what took off. And I've really embraced a couple of things about this, and we're going to continue our driving program. We start off with Luigi, but we still have Mario and Luigi, and now we still have these animals. But it's taught me several different things. One, how important training is. I want to make the point that we're not doing this to be a circus trick or
I don't think so. You're finding out their adaptability.
I'm sensitive about that. It's more than that. But we've learned that just the training itself, when we compare to other animals that didn't go through the training, it helps their stress hormones. So that we have like a buffer hormone called DHEA, and it kind of buffers the toxicity of our stress hormone, which in us is cortisol. So just going through training and learning and the mastery, and I don't know if we can talk about self-agency with rats, but why not? A sense of control.
I think on a broader scale, what you're also emphasizing is there was a lot of people that adopted cats and dogs during COVID, you included. Mm-hmm. And there's the E word, the importance of mental and physical enrichment. Mm-hmm. And I think this is kind of a parallel. The training that you're doing for rats is also applying to why all of us that are lucky to have a dog or cat in our life need to invest in their lives to enrich them, correct?
Right. And with the stress hormones, it's suggesting that their well-being and their health will be better. And we addressed exactly the enriched environment. So we have some rats that live in Disneyland. There's a larger cage. They have toys to play with. We change them up every 3 to 4 days. They get physical activity. And I would love for all of my animals to be in this. We're still fighting regulations about the way they should be. But the animals that were raised in an enriched environment versus the more standard laboratory environment, they learn to drive. In fact, when we compared, the animals in the standard environment couldn't learn to drive. It was just too scary. They couldn't adapt to the new things. And so I kind of hit around saying their enriched animals got their driver's license, but our standard house animals didn't. So, I mean, it's our responsibility to enrich, to provide an environment that the brains will live in. And for example, maybe I haven't checked this out because it's not written in a scientific report, but I think it was in the Guinness Book of World Records, and there was some news stories written about it. But the longest living cats, there was like cream puff or something, 38 years. Do you know this?
Yeah.
And then the same individual had one of the second. So a 34-year-old and a 38-year-old cat. And I was going, oh my gosh, what? And I don't think they were related. What is this guy doing? And sure enough, I'm not sure he knew the scientific basis behind it, but he provided an incredible cat-enriched environment. They had a little outdoor run, and then he had a theater downstairs where he would show them nature films. I don't know if they even paid attention to it, but the lights and sounds, the attention. Yeah. He gave them varied diets. For example, a dropper of red wine, he said, to help their circulation. I don't know, varied food and varied environments.
Wow.
And a lot of contact could push the lifespan limit on some of these. So that's an amazing story.
I think
it was reported in the news.
Home, yeah. I have a cat who is a certified therapy cat, pet safety cat, Casey. He helps me in pet first aid classes. I train him to be in a harness and walk. He touches paws, he circles, he does all these things, jumps on table, answers questions, rides in a pet stroller, and lets me with my dog show people how to do different things in pet first aid. And I see him at night and he's like, nom, 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 nom. And I feel like, oh my gosh, I gave him a good day.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're saying the different experiments. And folks, this lady is a brainiac, well-researched, well-respected in the field of neuroscience. But I think she's helping us learn more about ourselves and our companion animals through your rat research.
Oh, thanks. And I think that's what I love the most about the driving rats is that it's a wonderful outreach program. I probably would not be talking to you and your audience members if you wanted to know the effects of chronic stress on cells in the hippocampus, which I could talk a lot about. But this is a platform.
It is.
Lots of people ask about it. Then I can follow up with information about the brain and neuroplasticity and how our brains change every day of our lives and how we're accountable for what we put, not only our pets, but ourselves. What are we doing with our brains so that they're changing in response to our changing lives?
Well, the brain is a muscle and you use it or lose it, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. From the womb to the tomb to the last day, it's changing.
So Rat City video, you were talking about that. Rats get blamed a lot, you said, for like diseases and deaths, but they're also been showing us how to deal with different changes in our environment, our health, and all that. So, can you tell us a little bit about the Rat City video? What's that about?
Yeah, so that was they came out last summer to learn more about the driving rats. But the theme of that video, it was released in Canada about a month ago. I'm not sure I don't think it's been released in the US yet, but you can look at little snippets. But it's kind of it's presenting the rat like a superhero with all of its extreme survivability. And so there are different researchers where they're looking at, how they live in the city and how they burrow underneath, and amazing things like, there's a lot of people, we love our rats and we try to give them great environments, but most of the people on this planet are trying to kill them as fast as they can.
Right.
There are health issues and such. So some of the research has been, how do we outsmart these animals? And it's I mentioned before, it's very difficult to poison them because they have this bait shyness. They are very smart about this.
And that was something I didn't even know. They're sniffing, the rat poison, and they're like, we've never had that before.
A little bit of it. And then if it makes them sick and other animals are around, they kind of go, oh, we're going to, avoid this.
Wow.
But also, they seem to be able to adapt to poisons. The ones that live and genetically through generations, you can have rats that have tolerance to rat poison, but this can be a big problem for animals like cats or other animals that are killing these rats because those animals will not be tolerant to the poison that the rats are now tolerant of, which is fascinating on many levels, that their immune systems can adapt so quickly. And that's what
that is so wild.
Through generations and through a lifespan.
I can't believe it. It's almost done. I want to be on the show more. We have about 30 seconds left. What's something you want to tell everyone about rats and yourself?
What they're teaching me now, we've been through so much with the pandemic and negative, and a lot of research has been on stress. So I learned from the driving rats that they looked forward and anticipated driving. Before we could put them in the arena, they would start rev the engine. And so that made me want to learn more about what is going on in the brain when we anticipate something. And I think it's important to have that anticipation and to sculpt our brains for joy and positive emotions, as well as learning how to adapt and be resilient to the negative challenges that we face. So they've steered us to positive waters. These are roads.
Bottom line, rats are very smart and we can learn from them.